Hello everybody and welcome to this fun little episode all about the butternut squash. And now in the history of squashes, this is a relative newcomer, but the lineage has been around for hundreds of years in the New World, and where it was cultivated, sometimes even eaten raw. It's a latecomer in terms of the harvest of squashes, but it has a really rich and wonderful flavor. We're gonna prepare it in one of my favorite ways today, a very simple recipe with everything that you see. We're going to make butternut squash soup. Now, one thing I really love about this recipe is that you can, of course, make it your own and modify it as you go. A great way to do this is that you can roast off the butternut squash in the oven ahead of time. It adds just another richness to the soup. We're not gonna do that today. You can also add coconut milk at the end, and you can mess around with some of the spices and the other aromatics that we're gonna be using to fit your palate. As for us today, what I'm going to be making, let's run through the ingredient list. So for today, we'll need 1 butternut squash, 1.5 onion, today I have red ones, 2 cloves of garlic, 150 grams of raw cashews, or around a cup, half a pound of carrots, 2 celery stalks, 2 tablespoons of minced ginger. And for our spices, I have 2 teaspoons of ground cumin, 2 teaspoons of ground coriander, 1 teaspoon of ground curry, and 2 teaspoons of ground turmeric. I also have 7 cups of stock. We made chicken stock a couple of weeks ago. You can watch how to see that here. Okay, so first step is we need to chop everything up. I'm gonna start with the onion. Now when I'm cutting onions like this, I'll just take off the top part of that. And here's a fun little trick to help you dice up onion faster. Then where the stem of the onion is, or where the root comes out, go ahead and slice that in half. And it's all connected at this point, which is great. It's a great starting off point for us to further slice it. Then take your knife very carefully and then cut about halfway. And then again. And then cut down without cutting all the way to the end. Great. And then we have a couple of different cuts already made. It's all being held together by the stem here, and then holding it carefully. We have diced onion. Onion is all diced up. Our next step is to peel and cube our butternut squash, as well as chop up the rest of our vegetables. I will go ahead and do that right now. There we go. Okay, we have our butternut squash cubed, diced red onion, celery and carrots, minced ginger and garlic. Why don't you guys come back here and let's get cooking. And welcome to Pan Cam. I have some coconut oil kind of warmed up in there. So let's go ahead and let's add our onions. We used about a tablespoon of coconut oil. There we go. And then we're just gonna kind of cook this down. It looks like a lot of onions. It's gonna cook down quite a bit though. I'm gonna cook this for about 5 to 7 minutes on a medium high heat. We're about 5 minutes in. We're just gonna keep going. We want them to reduce a little bit more. Check back in. Okay, we're actually starting to see a little bit of browning in the bottom of the pan. We know that most of the moisture now is gone out of the onions. They've reduced quite a bit. This is exactly kind of where we want them. I want to be careful not to burn them. But we have some other aromatics that we need to add to the mix. So first, I'm going to add the garlic and ginger. Oh man, it's already fragrant. And give that a little bit of a stir. I'm also going to add the cashews at this moment. I want to try and get a little bit of color on the cashews. This dish has a lot of influence from Indian cuisine, and that's, you can tell in the spice blend, but also by the use of the cashews and all of these onions as well. I'm gonna make sure that I'm stirring it quite often during this stage. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and add all of the spices in. And I'm basically, now that all the moisture's gone, I'm just kind of toasting these spices, just releasing some of the aromatics, and man, does it smell good. I've turned the heat down to medium too. I'm starting to get quite a bit of color on the bottom of the pan, and I don't want to burn anything, so I gotta move pretty quickly now. In go the carrots and the celery. Give them a little bit of mix, and then right behind them, the butternut squash. Oh my goodness. For the last trick, we're gonna add our homemade stock. Be sure to spill some out of the pan. That's a very important step. And then as you're kind of stirring this, be sure to scrape the bottom of the pan. We want all of that real wonderful texture and those flavors to be released into the stock, into the soup. We're gonna cook this for about 20 minutes. We'll check back in on it then. Well, the soup's been simmering away for about 20 minutes, and you can see that the butternut squash is, I can just pierce it with a fork, so I know that it's done. The next step, I'm just going to turn the heat off, and I'm going to let it sit for 15 minutes before we blend. The soup's been resting for 15 minutes, and now it is time to blend. If you have a blender, this is a great tool to use for this. If you have an immersion blender, one that you can stick in here, even better. But I don't have one, so we're going to use this Vitamix here. Whenever you're blending something that's very hot, you want to make sure that you're being extra careful. You don't fill it all the way up, and you also want to make sure that the lid is loose fitting, because there's a lot of thermal heat exchange going on. We want to give it room to breathe. So we're going to do this in batches. Start slow, raise it up. We're going to pour it into another pot. Perfect. Now at this stage, if you have some coconut milk, this will be the time to add it. This is also the time that we are going to season with salt if we need to. So go ahead and try it and see where it's at, if you need any salt or not. I'm also going to take a sprig of fresh rosemary and smack it together to help release some of those oils. Plop it in there. We're going to throw it back on the stove for about 10 to 15 minutes, just a real low heat to kind of let everything come together one more time, and then we're ready to serve. I'll see you then. Well, our soup is finally done, and it is time to serve. So for this, I'm going to just take a bowl and ladle up some of this wonderful soup that we've been creating for the past hour or so. The aroma is fantastic, and like most soups, the longer it sits, the more rich it's going to become. So the next day after you've left it in the fridge, it'll just be even more delicious. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of, or drizzle a little bit of olive oil on this. I'm going to get a dollop of just plain yogurt. Put that in there. And then I'll add a little bit of cilantro and a little bit of rosemary. And if you have a loaf of bread sitting around, this is a great accompaniment for the soup. So there you have it. One of my favorite ways to prepare butternut squash. It's a soup. It goes great with bread. Everything here is homemade, including the stock and the bread. I love the way that all of the flavors play in amongst themselves, and it is just a delightful dish that was sure to warm you up. I do hope that you guys try this. Please let me know if you do, and if you make any alterations or variations, please let me know about that as well. I just love butternut squash. Next time you're at the supermarket, go ahead and pick one up and see what kind of magic you can create with it. It's been raining all day over here. I'm gonna settle in with this soup, and I wish you all happy cooking. Until next time.